Ladies and gentlemen, let me start with a simple but powerful question. As you step into 2026, are you moving forward in life or are you just getting older? Because growth is not guaranteed by time. Many people enter a new year with new calendars, new planners, and new resolutions, but the same habits, the same fears, and the same excuses. Today, I want to talk to you about three things, just three, that silently hold people back year after year. If you fix these three things, 2026 will not be just another year you survive. It will be a year you transform. Most people believe they need clarity before they take action, but in reality, clarity is a result of action, not a prerequisite for it. We often tell ourselves that once everything makes sense, once the plan is perfect, once confidence arrives, then we will begin. This way of thinking feels logical, but it quietly keeps us stuck. Growth does not begin with certainty, it begins with movement. When you wait for clarity, you are usually waiting for comfort, and comfort rarely leads to progress. The truth is that no one ever feels fully ready before stepping into something meaningful. They feel uncertain, slightly afraid and unsure, and they move anyway. Overthinking is often mistaken for preparation, but it is usually just fear wearing a thoughtful disguise. We replay scenarios in our minds, imagining outcomes that haven't happened, convincing ourselves that thinking more will protect us from failure. In reality, it does the opposite. Excessive thinking drains energy, delays decisions, and weakens self-trust. Action, even imperfect action, restores momentum. The moment you act, your mind shifts from imagining problems to solving them. You begin to learn what works and what doesn't, not through theory, but through experience. That learning is what people call clarity. Every successful individual you admire once stood where you are now, uncertain, inexperienced, and unsure of the outcome. What separated them was not superior intelligence or luck, but their willingness to start before they felt ready. They understood, consciously or not, that action creates feedback. Feedback creates awareness. Awareness creates improvement. Waiting, on the other hand, creates doubt, and doubt creates inaction. The longer you wait, the heavier the first step feels. The first move is always the hardest, because it breaks inertia. But once momentum is created, progress becomes natural. Fear often appears strongest at the starting point. That is because fear thrives in imagination, not in motion. When you stay still, fear has space to grow, exaggerate, and control your thinking. When you act, fear loses its power because reality replaces assumption. You may discover that the challenge is smaller than you imagined, or that you are more capable than you believed. Even if things do not go as planned, you gain something far more valuable than comfort. You gain direction. Direction does not come from thinking, it comes from doing. Action also builds confidence in a way that positive thinking never can. Confidence is not something you wait to feel. It is something you earn through repeated effort. Each step forward, no matter how small, sends a message to your mind that you are capable of handling discomfort and uncertainty. Over time, this rewires how you see yourself. You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What can I learn next?" This shift in mindset is powerful, because it transforms challenges from threats into opportunities for growth. It is important to understand that action does not mean reckless behavior or blind decisions. It means intentional movement despite incomplete information. No plan is ever complete before execution. The missing pieces reveal themselves only after you begin. Progress is rarely a straight line. It is a process of adjusting, refining, and continuing. Those adjustments are only possible when you are already in motion. Standing still gives you no data to improve with. When you look back at moments of growth in your life, they likely began with a decision to act before you felt fully prepared. That pattern is not accidental. It is how growth works. If you want momentum, take a step. If you want confidence, take responsibility. If you want clarity, take action. The path forward does not appear all at once. It unfolds as you walk it. Comparison has quietly become one of the most common and damaging habits of modern life. Without realizing it, people measure their progress, worth, and potential against others, often using incomplete or misleading information. This habit feels natural, especially in a world where success, happiness, and achievement are constantly displayed in curated forms. What is rarely acknowledged is that comparison shifts focus away from personal growth and places it on external validation. The moment you start measuring yourself against someone else, you stop fully engaging with your own journey. The problem with comparison is not ambition, it is distortion. You are comparing your behind-the-scenes reality with someone else's edited highlights. You see the results of years of effort, discipline, and failure, but not the struggle that preceded them. This creates unrealistic expectations and unnecessary pressure. Instead of motivating progress, comparison often produces discouragement, self-doubt, and impatience. You begin to question your pace, your choices, and your abilities, even when you are making steady progress in your own life. Every individual operates under different circumstances, timelines, and responsibilities. Some people start early, others start late. Some have access to resources, guidance, or opportunities that others do not. None of this diminishes your potential, but comparison convinces you that it does. It ignores context and complexity and reduces success to a surface-level snapshot. Growth, however, is deeply personal. What looks like slow progress from the outside may actually be a period of learning, healing, or building foundations that will support long-term success. When comparison becomes a habit, it gradually erodes confidence. Instead of appreciating how far you have come, your attention is pulled toward how far someone else appears to be. This creates a sense of inadequacy that is not rooted in reality, but in perception. Confidence grows when you acknowledge effort, consistency, and empowerment. Comparison interrupts this process by shifting the standard from personal progress to external approval. Over time, this leads to frustration and a loss of motivation, not because you are incapable, but because you are no longer focused on your own path. Comparison also distracts you from developing your unique strengths. Each person has a different combination of skills, experiences, and perspectives. When you try to mirror someone else's journey, you may neglect what makes you distinct. Success achieved through imitation is often unsustainable because it is not aligned with who you are. Authentic growth requires self-awareness and acceptance. It requires understanding that your value does not increase or decrease based on someone else's achievements. It remains constant, shaped only by how intentionally you choose to grow. Another subtle danger of comparison is that it can create a false sense of failure, even during periods of meaningful progress. You may be learning a new skill, building discipline, or making healthier decisions. But if these changes are not immediately visible or celebrated, they feel insignificant compared to someone else's visible success. This mindset undervalues process and overvalues outcomes. Long-term achievement, however, is built in quiet moments of consistency, not in instant results. Shifting away from comparison does not mean ignoring excellence or lowering standards. It means redefining success in a way that is sustainable and personal. Progress should be measured by how aligned your actions are with your values, not by how quickly they match someone else's timeline. When you focus on improvement rather than comparison, growth becomes more fulfilling and less stressful. You regain control over your motivation because it is no longer dependent on external benchmarks. When attention returns to your own journey, clarity improves. decisions become easier because they are based on purpose rather than pressure. Energy that was once spent on envy or self-judgment can be redirected toward learning, effort, and resilience. In this state, growth feels intentional rather than forced. You begin to recognize that there is no universal timeline for success, only a personal commitment to becoming better than you were before. Human behavior is deeply influenced by environment, often more than people realize. The thoughts you entertain, the standards you accept, and the actions you repeat are shaped every day by what surrounds you. Whether it is the people you interact with, the conversations you engage in, or the content you consume, your environment constantly reinforces certain beliefs and behaviors. When that environment is negative, stagnant, or discouraging, personal growth becomes significantly harder, not because you lack ability, but because you are operating against constant resistance. Many people underestimate the emotional cost of remaining in environments that drain energy rather than restore it. Bain. G. Surrounded by persistent negativity, complaints, or pessimism subtly alters your mindset over time. You may begin to normalize mediocrity, justify inaction, or lower your expectations for yourself. This shift rarely happens suddenly. It develops gradually, making it difficult to recognize. Over time, what once felt uncomfortable begins to feel familiar, and familiarity is often mistaken for stability, even when it limits progress. The influence of people is particularly powerful. The attitudes, beliefs, and habits of those around you inevitably affect your own. When conversations revolve around excuses rather than solutions, blame rather than responsibility, ambition slowly weakens. This does not mean that those people are intentionally harmful. Often they are simply acting from their own fears or limitations. However, prolonged exposure to such mindsets can erode confidence and clarity. Growth requires encouragement, accountability, and challenge, all of which are difficult to sustain in environments that resist change. An empowering environment does not eliminate difficulty, but it reframes it. Instead of reinforcing limitations, it encourages learning and effort. In such spaces, setbacks are treated as feedback rather than failure, and progress is acknowledged even when results are not immediate. This kind of environment strengthens resilience because it supports forward movement rather than comfort-based stagnation. When you are surrounded by individuals who value growth, WTH, discipline, and integrity, those qualities become easier to practice consistently. It is also important to consider the non-physical aspects of environment. The information you consume daily shapes your perception of what is possible. Constant exposure to negative news, unproductive entertainment, or content that promotes unrealistic standards can distort thinking and weaken focus. Over time, this influences how you see yourself and your potential. Creating a supportive environment may require setting boundaries, not only with people, but also with digital habits and routines that quietly undermine clarity and motivation. Choosing an empowering environment is not about rejecting others or seeking perfection. It is about intentional alignment. It involves recognizing which influences help you grow and which ones hold you in place. This awareness allows you to make conscious choices about where you invest your time and energy. Sometimes growth requires reducing exposure rather than confrontation. Distance can create the space needed for perspective, self-reflection, and renewed direction. Change in environment often precedes change in behavior. When expectations rise, standards follow. When accountability increases, discipline strengthens. This is why even small adjustments, such as seeking out constructive conversations or engaging with content that encourages learning, can have a significant impact over time. These changes compound, gradually reshaping mindset and It's in a way that supports long-term development. Ultimately, growth thrives in environments that challenge you to be more intentional, more aware, and more responsible for your actions. When your surroundings reinforce effort and self-respect, progress feels sustainable rather than forced. In such conditions, potential is not suppressed by doubt or distraction. It is nurtured through consistency and conscious choice. Fear is often misunderstood as a sign that something is wrong, when in reality it is usually a sign that something meaningful is about to happen. Most people interpret fear as a warning to stop, retreat, or wait until conditions feel safer. This interpretation feels logical because fear is uncomfortable, and the human mind naturally seeks comfort. However, fear is not designed to protect you from growth. It is designed to protect you from uncertainty. Growth, by its very nature, exists on the other side of uncertainty, which is why fear almost always appears at moments of potential progress. Fear does not mean you are incapable. It means you are stepping beyond what is familiar. Every time you attempt something new, your mind searches for past experiences to guide you. When it finds none, it creates hesitation. This hesitation manifests as fear, doubt, or anxiety. The mistake people make is assuming that these emotions are indicators of inability rather than indicators of expansion. If fear truly meant you should stop, then no one would ever achieve anything beyond their comfort zone. One of the reasons fear feels so powerful is because it is amplified by imagination. The mind projects worst-case scenarios, often without evidence, and presents them as likely outcomes. These imagined failures feel real enough to trigger emotional responses, even though they have not occurred. When you treat these thoughts as facts, fear gains authority over your decisions. Action weakens this authority. Once you move forward, fear is forced to confront reality. And reality is almost always less dramatic than the mind's predictions. Courage is often misunderstood as the absence of fear, but courage is the decision to act despite it. Waiting for fear to disappear before taking action is a strategy that guarantees delay. Fear rarely disappears on its own. It diminishes through exposure. Each time you act in the presence of fear, you teach yourself that discomfort is survivable and uncertainty is manageable. This repeated exposure builds emotional resilience, which is far more valuable than temporary confidence. Fear also serves as a signal that you are operating near the edge of your current capabilities. This edge is where learning occurs. Within comfort, skills remain stagnant because there is no pressure to adapt. At the edge, effort increases, awareness sharpens, and growth accelerates. Fear highlights this boundary. Instead of avoiding it, recognizing fear as a marker of potential allows you to use it as guidance rather than obstruction. People allow fear to dictate their decisions because they overestimate the cost of failure and underestimate the cost of inaction. Failure is usually temporary and informative. Inaction, however, quietly accumulates regret. Opportunities pass, confidence erodes, and self-trust weakens over time. Fear encourages avoidance, but avoidance reinforces fear, creating a cycle that becomes increasingly difficult to break. Action interrupts this cycle, even when the outcome is uncertain. It is also important to understand that fear often changes form rather than disappears. Early fear may be about starting. Later fear may be about visibility, responsibility, or consistency. This does not mean you are moving backward. It means the challenge has evolved. Each stage of growth introduces a new version of fear, aligned with a higher level of responsibility. Recognizing this prevents discouragement and reinforces the understanding that fear is part of progress, not evidence against it. When you begin to see fear as information rather than instruction, your relationship with it changes. Instead of asking how to avoid fear, you begin asking what fear is pointing toward. Often, it points toward the very actions that will develop strength, skill, and self-belief. In this way, fear becomes a guidepost, indicating where growth is possible if you are willing to move forward despite discomfort. Motivation is often celebrated as the driving force behind success, but in reality, it is unreliable and temporary. It comes in waves, influenced by mood, circumstances, and external inspiration. Some days you feel energized and focused, while on others that feeling disappears without warning. When progress depends solely on motivation, consistency becomes impossible. Discipline, on the other hand, is not dependent on how you feel. It is a system of behavior that functions even when enthusiasm is low, clarity is missing, or results are not yet visible. Discipline is the ability to act in alignment with long-term goals rather than short-term emotions. It requires commitment to a process, not just excitement about an outcome. Motivation may help you start, but discipline is what allows you to continue. Many people begin strong because motivation is high at the start of something new. Over time, as novelty fades and effort increases, motivation naturally declines. This is where most people stop, not because the goal is unattainable, but because they relied on a feeling instead of a structure. One of the most important qualities of discipline is that it removes decision fatigue. When actions are guided by habit and routine, you no longer debate whether to show up or not. You simply do what is required. This consistency compounds over time. Small, disciplined actions repeated daily create results that appear impressive in hindsight but were built quietly through repetition. Motivation looks powerful in moments, but discipline is powerful in accumulation. Discipline also builds trust with oneself. Every time you follow through on a commitment, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. This self-trust strengthens confidence in a practical way, not through affirmations, but through evidence. When you know you will act regardless of how you feel, uncertainty loses its influence. This internal stability becomes a competitive advantage, especially in environments where others depend on mood or inspiration to perform. Another overlooked aspect of discipline is that it protects progress during difficult periods. Life is unpredictable and challenges are inevitable. During stress, disappointment, or fatigue, motivation is often the first thing to disappear. Discipline ensures that effort continues even when conditions are unfavorable. This is why disciplined individuals often outperform more talented but inconsistent ones. Talent creates potential, but discipline converts potential into results. Discipline does not mean intensity at all times. It means consistency over time. It allows for rest without guilt and effort without drama. Rather than pushing aggressively when motivation is high and stopping completely when it drops, discipline creates a steady pace. This pace is sustainable and resilient. It reduces burnout and increases long-term effectiveness because actions are guided by intention rather than impulse. It is also important to understand that discipline is a skill, not a personality trait. It is developed through practice, not inherent. It begins with small commitments that are realistic and specific. Each completed commitment strengthens the habit of follow-through. Over time, what once required effort becomes automatic. This automation frees mental energy, allowing focus to shift toward improvement rather than initiation. Motivation often focuses on how good success will feel, while discipline focuses on what needs to be done today. This present-focused approach keeps progress grounded in action rather than imagination. While motivation is future-oriented and emotional, discipline is present-oriented and practical. Both have value, but only one is dependable. When discipline becomes the foundation of effort, results are no longer accidental. Progress becomes predictable, not because the path is easy, but because consistency is built into behavior. In this way, discipline becomes the quiet force behind achievement, sustaining momentum long after motivation fades. Procrastination often disguises itself as planning, preparation, or waiting for the right conditions. People convince themselves that they will begin once they feel more confident, have more time, or gain more clarity. This mindset feels responsible, but it quietly delays progress. The truth is that there is rarely a perfect moment to start. Conditions are never fully ideal, and waiting for them only increases hesitation. Progress begins not when circumstances are perfect, but when the decision to act is made despite imperfection. The idea, oh, if someday, creates a false sense of security. It allows you to believe that growth is still part of your future, even when no action is taken in the present. This belief reduces urgency and weakens accountability. Over time, someday becomes a habit, and that habit turns into stagnation. The longer action is postponed, the heavier it feels to begin. Starting now, even in a small way, breaks this pattern and restores momentum. Immediate action has a psychological advantage. When you act, you shift from intention to execution, which changes how your mind engages with the task. Instead of imagining difficulty, you begin solving real problems. This transition reduces anxiety and builds focus. Action anchors attention in the present moment, preventing the mind from drifting into unnecessary worry or distraction. Even minimal effort can create a sense of progress, which reinforces continued action. Starting now also forces prioritization. When time feels unlimited, tasks are easily delayed. When you commit to action in the present, you must decide what matters most. This clarity simplifies decision-making and reduces overwhelm. Rather than trying to do everything, attention is directed toward what can be done next. Progress becomes manageable because it is broken into actionable steps rather than postponed ideals. Another important aspect of starting now is the accumulation of experience. Skill, confidence, and understanding are built through repetition, not intention. Each day of delay is a missed opportunity to learn. Starting early allows for mistakes, adjustments, and improvement over time. Those who begin later often feel pressure to catch up, which increases stress and reduces patience. Beginning now, even imperfectly, provides the advantage of time, which is one of the most valuable resources in personal growth. Delaying action often stems from fear of failure or judgment. Starting now confronts this fear directly. While discomfort may arise, it is usually temporary. What remains is the knowledge that you are capable of taking responsibility for your progress. This sense of ownership strengthens self-respect and independence. When you rely less on external permission or ideal conditions, confidence becomes rooted in action rather than approval. Starting now does not require dramatic change. It requires commitment to a first step. Small actions, when taken consistently, create significant outcomes over time. The power lies not in intensity but in continuity. Waiting for a surge of motivation often results in inaction, whereas starting with a small, manageable task builds momentum naturally. This momentum makes subsequent actions easier and more automatic. Time continues to move regardless of whether action is taken. The difference lies in how that time is used. When you begin now, progress becomes visible and measurable. When you delay, the future remains hypothetical. Starting now transforms intention into reality. It replaces regret with effort and uncertainty with direction. In doing so, it aligns daily behavior with long-term goals, turning potential into tangible progress through consistent action. I want to end with this thought. 1 year from now, you will look back at 2026 and say one of two things: I'm glad I changed, or I wish I had started. The choice is not in the stars, not in circumstances, and not in other people. The choice is in you. Fix these three things, And 2026 will not just change your calendar, it will change your life. Thank you, and may you walk forward with clarity, courage, and confidence.